February 26, 1917, a musical band goes into a recording studio and changes the world, for the good and the bad. The original Dixieland Jazz Band records Livery Stable Blues, which becomes the first jazz record recorded in history. They claim that they themselves, and themselves alone, invented the art form of jazz music. The problem, the entire band was white. So, what is jazz? 100 years since that record was released, and we sort of know the main players behind the genre. What is this genre and what does it mean in its importance to Black history? Jazz music has its roots deep in African American heritage and is an incredibly profound piece to discuss when speaking of Black History Month.
To get it out of the way, I hate jazz. Are you okay?
What do you mean you hate jazz?
On December 25th, Disney released Soul, a movie about a jazz player in search of what it means to be alive and how life and music blends together to be appreciated. Because of the release of the movie, Walt Disney World opened a small exhibit on the history of jazz. Yes, it's small, like embarrassingly small. Regardless of size, I want to do my best to bring you a better history and discussion of what jazz music means to African Americans during Black History Month. To discuss deeper into jazz, we have to go to the source. New Orleans, Louisiana, where many black slaves would band together in Congo Square, which you can find in Louis Armstrong Park today, to play music together. The concept of jazz is improvisational music. Music created on the spot, so wash tubs, jugs, boxes, anything they can get their hands on was something that they used in order to create music. The other part of this puzzle was the addition of black hymns and spirituals that added a voice to these musical creations. As these creations started to get popular, white culture took a lot of elements of jazz and began incorporating them into a new form of entertainment amongst the white crowd: minstrel shows. With minstrel shows in effect, they can now take black music as well as the mockery of black people and create a stream of entertainment revenue off the backs of black people that created it. Once the implementation of the black codes, one law forbid blacks from playing drums. To combat this, the use of stomping, clapping, and dancing was used in conjunction of the newly created genre of music, and a lot of these elements exist today. Even the name jazz was a part of an African American language, coming from the 1860s from a word jasm, which meant energy. But it could also mean sex, since there was a taboo on the word jazz itself. The history of jazz is deep, and this is barely scratching the surface, but I want to at least keep you folks engaged for the little time I do have, and not have an entire hour and a half for the entire history of jazz. But let's talk about some of the notable things of some of the big players of jazz. Jazz has three distinct areas that are rooted in black history. You have jazz from New Orleans, jazz from Chicago, and jazz that has its roots in New York City. In the jazz exhibit in Epcot, there is a fourth, Los Angeles, but this is a more modern look at jazz as performers such as Beyonce, John Legend, Norah Jones are taking the genre and evolving it more as time goes on.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, here's one you all can sing with us. When the Saints go marching in.
First, let's talk about Louis Armstrong, the father of jazz, the most well-known name that came from the genre. As far as moving the needle in the civil rights movement, Louis, well, let's just say his game plan was silence. He figured it was best that he play his trumpet.
That's what they brought me over here to be myself.
Do you feel your style has
a
changed
lot
at all?
of cats come over here and the first thing they want is a hi-hat and a cape, and tiles and all. I just want to blow the horn, and that's all. Now, what they think I should do and all that.
Oh, nobody's suggesting you should change, but...
Well, if they say clowning, what is clowning? Anything to make the people get a little laugh, to put humor in your program and the note still comes out. That's not clowning. Clowning when you can't play nothing.
And though the trumpet, he can have some form of unity. This created a backlash between Armstrong and the black community until the integration of the 9 black students in Central High School in 1957. Armstrong did speak out against President Eisenhower. This resonated deep with the black community, but it wasn't enough, and many seen Louis Armstrong as an Uncle Tom, a derogatory term for blacks that work against the black community.
The Negro who is supposed to be stupid, but I put so much innocence and cleanliness into my roles, I'm actually making the Negro white. Now, I think we get along with white people just as much as anybody else, but we do it with music, and we play the same music the white people.
That's right.
But white people don't act like that.
He spent a great time quietly working with civil rights leaders until his death in 1971. Now, this may not be the best tale to attempt to remember Louis Armstrong, but it's key to remember that at a time when it was important to speak out against black rights, Armstrong chose different. He remained indifferent and quiet. He is immortalized due to his talent, but there could have been so much more he could have done with his platform. I wonder what could have happened. What could have been achieved had Armstrong stood up for what's right? I wonder. We move to the jazz movement steep in the Windy City, Chicago, where one of the best artists to emerge from the city, Cora Lovey Austin, made waves by breaking new ground and shattering glass ceilings, not only as a pioneer in women's arts, breaking out in the jazz movements, but as a top-tier jazz performer. She led her own band, the Blues Serenaders. As a pianist, she helped inspire new artists in the blues genre like Mary Lou Williams, who went on to shape big band music through the use of jazz itself. From New Orleans to Chicago to New York City, we see a bigger emergence of jazz with artists like Duke Ellington and Ella Fitzgerald, and they all happen to play at the most segregated jazz club in the United States, the Cotton Club. The Cotton Club was a whites-only jazz club with a few exceptions. They would often portray darker-skinned performers as savages on stage and often relied on performers that were lighter-skinned to be background dancers, and they were overly sexualized. Even though Duke Ellington at this time was a renowned jazz performer, the Cotton Club's request for Ellington to play more jungle music, although this was problematic, still gave Ellington a small crack in the door of creativity to experiment and push the boundaries of jazz music. Due to a large race riot that occurred in Harlem in 1935, there was a bigger push to allow blacks to enter the club. There were many boycotts to raise awareness at the Cotton Club's reluctance at black patrons. Langston Hughes was one of the few black patrons that was even allowed inside the Cotton Club, and once stated, Harlem Negroes did not like the Cotton Club. It never appreciated its Jim Crow policy in the very heart of their dark community. Nor did ordinary Negroes like the growing influx of whites towards Harlem after sundown, flooding the little cabarets and bars where formerly only colored people laughed and sang, and where the now strangers were given the best ringside tables to sit and stare at the Negro customers, like amusing animals in a zoo. Smaller nightclubs started to spring up in the Harlem area, and by 1940, due to higher rent, shifting interests in music and entertainments, and the non-conformist nature to allow integration from the club, the Cotton Club closed permanently. So the most important part to really take out of all of this is that this is really ingrained in black history and the importance of black history, especially when it comes to music as itself and as it keeps going and going and going. And knowing that the roots of jazz has spurred offshoots of rock, has spurred offshoots of bits of country, hip-hop, rap, every musical genre known to man. And it all started here, New Orleans, in the 1800s, when African Americans would get together and band together and play music as a whole group. And this is why this is important.